Hey there friends, it's Codiak here, one half of the team behind Legacy Gaming, and listen up Outriders. Livid just got done sitting in on an ambassador community Q&A session where numerous fantastic content creators, including ourselves, got to pose as many burning questions to the developers as we possibly could within an hour, and we are here to break it all down. Now, just a quick clarification for you all, because it's bound to come up in the comments below. Livid and I are Outriders ambassadors, and all that means is that we applied with our content to gain early access and the chance to communicate our concerns about the game with the developers. Simple as that. No money, no flights, nothing. It was a completely proactive decision on our parts in order to bring you all content as quickly as possible. So with all that out of the way, let's get into what you are really here for. All of those juicy bits of information and insight into how the developers are feeling about the demo and launch, and if they're actually paying attention to the community questions. Spoiler alert, they are. First, let's start with some overall demo takeaways. The team shared that more than 2 million players downloaded and checked out the game. In just one weekend alone, the amount of important data and all-around feedback flying in is immeasurably helpful to them, and they can't thank the players enough. Even the outright negativity from a portion of the player base is still important to them, as they still provide a different perspective, and that's always good when you're trying to balance out a game. Overall, they felt the feedback to be very rewarding. From the very start of the production of Outriders, their goal was to make sure the player's experience was the most important thing, not how the developers themselves experienced the game. This carries all the way through into how transparent they are, something we've talked about quite a bit on this channel, and as you'll see, they doubled down on that in the Q&A. In terms of the story, they wanted to be sure they pulled on a few different strings, particularly the humor and darkness that the game taps into. Obviously, we could only get a taste of that during the demo, but we were told they've tried to be very cognizant about balancing those two ideas, and as the story evolves, we're going to see more and more of that. I'll be the first to admit the story hasn't really grabbed me quite yet. It's all a bit tongue-in-cheek, but as I've said before, you can't judge this game based on just a few hours of a demo. An interesting question that came up was in regards to the healing mechanic in Outriders. Was it a core decision from the start or a later addition? Surprisingly, it wasn't originally planned. In fact, classes weren't even part of the original discussion, but they quickly realized that they wanted to make sure there was a way to accent and shape different playstyles players might exude. Classes quickly became a core pillar, and shortly after, unique healing mechanics followed suit to help shape a class and consequently a player's playstyle even more, but still allow for the player to break outside of how that class is meant to be played. In short, they wanted this all to really help sell who you specifically are as an Outrider, and we have to say we think it's been pretty successful so far. Another question directed at the developers was if they were surprised by the sort of meta that came out of the demo, or even any strong combos that players appear to gravitate towards. In terms of the meta discussion, they didn't really want to say they felt that a meta was forming, because what we see right now is just a fraction of the game and overall interactions between abilities, weapons, mods, and skill trees. This was still fantastic for them in terms of collecting data, but no knee-jerk changes are going to come from just demo gameplay. The demo only scratches the surface, and the full release will be amplified a million times more, so making hard assessments now would just be irresponsible. They also mentioned a few things they didn't expect to come from players in the demo, one being how captains ended up being the most used and seen as the most effective farming method in the community. They hoped that quests would be the go-to, but chuckled when knowing that players will find the most broken ways to do things, always. The time manipulation to get epics at the vendors was also something unplanned and shocking to see, but through it all, seeing how eager players were to put in dozens, sometimes hundreds of hours into farming helps prove to them that the abilities and mechanics work, will only get better when the full game opens up. They also mentioned a few other things, one being that people are vastly underestimating the PYRO, myself included. To make that sentence stick, right before the demo was launched, the Trickster got a significant buff, and through playtesting further into the actual game, the PYRO is one of the classes that certainly didn't need adjusting and definitely isn't the weakest class. And I think that's pretty funny considering I constantly rank that at the bottom of my list. I do think the PYRO just didn't get a fair shake in the demo, and I'm excited to see that class really ascend once the game launches. They also touched on how world tiers are being judged by players right now, and obviously they're very low compared to where they will be, which are going to be significantly more challenging once the game launches. They were surprised, however, at how heavily players farmed the lower world tiers, with even some of the methods surprising them. But at the end of the day, they just love seeing players really using that mechanic to their advantage. Now for a big one, their plan in regards to hackers and cheaters, something that's been plaguing the community for a few days now. All they can really say is that they are more aware of it than we all think and are incredibly happy these issues came to light during the demo, not the launch. They have daily meetings to check in on the situations, how devastating it could be for the community, actions they can take to solve it, and are careful not to make any knee-jerk reactions that may touch people who aren't cheating, but a piece of loot potentially flags them. There are some current possible solutions of removing cheating players entirely from the multiplayer pool so as not to affect the experience of other players, which we see as a great thing. Just a reminder to those that if you are going to cheat, you're going to get punished. It's simple as that. The team also fielded some smaller questions, definitely not game-changing stuff, but interesting nonetheless. When asked if they considered a blood or gore toggle, they said right now simply no, because of how integral those aspects are to the effects within the game, and that would take a ton of development time, and it's just not a priority for them. What about having cinematics automatically be skipped as a toggleable function? Right now, no plans for that, as some of the technical aspects needed to really be evaluated here are core to the streaming systems for loading portions of the game, but they will look into it if they can. The team also pointed out a cool little trick for deployable items, specifically for the Technomancer. If you weren't already aware, you can hold down the skill button and you'll get a more precise reticle, which will allow you to more accurately deploy a skill. The team admits this was not explained well enough in the demo. In terms of accidentally deleting gear because of a lack of a loot locking feature, the developers are actively looking to implement a solution here, whether it be gear locking, favorites, or something else. They just want to make sure it doesn't end up hindering the smoothness of the dismantling system. Now, I bet a lot of you know that there will be a stash component coming to the game that will allow you to transfer loot between characters and store things as well. If you didn't, well, now you do. The ambassadors asked about the size of the stash, and the current estimate is between 50 to 100 slots. And we definitely think this sounds low, but don't forget, with millions of players storing all of these items, the data really does add up. They'll be constantly looking at this system, whether they can improve it or expand it, but just as a quick reminder, you can also have 2 extra characters outside of your 4 main slots, which you can use as loot storage systems. We wanted just to make sure to point that out to everybody. Because of this issue, the ambassadors raised the parallels of opening up the API to allow app developers to create something like Destiny's item manager or some sort of cross-inventory management app. They stress the core elements of the game are their main concerns, but if this does end up being a game people love long-term, they are entirely open to helping with the ease of access to things like this in the community. We also brought up transmog a ton over the past few weeks, and even though it still won't be in the game at launch, they are looking into it as post-launch content. So that, in our opinion, is good news for everyone. Quickly touching on performance, they are well aware of dips in frame rates, especially on ultra settings. Part of the team there is actively working on that right now with high hopes that they will pull it all together for a launch. Now, how about a few answers regarding numerous bugs in the game? The main one being the mysterious disappearance of loot from inventories. They are very aware of this bug and are laser focused in finding the root cause. As I said, this is the biggest issue plaguing the game, and if they cannot figure this out for launch, they are in dire straits. I think this is probably the #1 issue above cheating, above transmog, above everything else. They have to make sure that people's legendaries and gear just don't disappear. Now, they are extremely happy that this bug showed its face during the demo rather than at full launch, and are putting all of their resources into finding it and fixing it. Another set of bugs is in regards to mods on the MIGRAINE legendary SMG and the Grim Marrow not entirely working as intended. They stated for the MIGRAINE at least, the mods are working, just that they are actively fighting each other to proc due to the coding. Because of this, the Bombs Ahead mod will be getting replaced with a different mod at release, and if you already have this weapon, it will be automatically updated. As for the Grim Marrow, they are looking into the cause of its Tier 3 mod having issues proccing as well. The last few things we want to talk about are endgame. Even though none of us have experienced it yet, that didn't stop us from asking questions. We started with expeditions, and the ambassadors asked how challenging will expeditions be for the solo players. They said it's hard to really say, as it's a personal experience sort of thing, but they will be hard. If you really want to go challenge yourselves, they stressed co-op is the way to go, as it really pumps up the difficulty for those encounters. They also wanted to say that the Eye of the Storm should be no joke. You will need a comprehensive and effective build to take it on, and honestly, that sounds perfect for us. Livid additionally raised the question that with expeditions by nature wanting the player to complete them as fast as possible for the best loot rewards, will there be any sort of endgame modes to offset that, such as an endless horde mode? They told us that no horde mode is planned currently, but laughing, said who knows what the future will hold. Others asked about raids and dungeons and more, and to all of it, they said the possibilities are certainly there if the players really want it and support the game. They really want to do things like this as they love the game they've created, but have to wait and see what the overall reception of Outriders is before making any decisions. And that's something we've talked about before. This is not a live service game, so they're going to have to wait and see if people flock to the game, support the game, and then they can make future decisions about how to support the game long term. The last few things to make it onto the devs' radar were in regards to in-game chat and leaderboards. They said there were discussions, but will they have them? No. Character cosmetics and more options for the character creator were additionally raised, but as of right now, there are no in-game character cosmetics to unlock, no microtransactions, and no additions to the character creator plan. Just a nice straightforward series of answers. The final thing brought up was how solid is that April 1st release date? In the age of games really coming out unfinished, it had to be asked. The developers said while those answering the questions probably weren't the right ones to talk about it, there doesn't seem to be any reason why the game would be released after April 1st. So for all of us waiting, that is great news. So that was a ton of information directly fired at your ear holes, but don't worry, an official write-up of the changes and feedback is coming. As soon as that goes live, we'll put a link in the description of this video. You guys know we're on board with this game, and even if it doesn't rise to the pinnacle of looter shooters, there's something to be said for developers sticking to their guns and creating a more traditional game. No live service, no microtransaction bullshit, and all with a ton of transparency. Besides the actual game itself, which I enjoy, it's a big reason why we're excited about this game to support the team of devs that actually care about the players. Anyways, you guys know that we will be here with tons more Outriders content in the coming weeks and months. And if you're not already subscribed, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs up and that big red button. It's completely free for you, and it really does help us out a ton. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.